Okay, if you're having a little difficulty with part C of the line detector challenge, which can be tricky, I want to help talk you through it. So to begin, I'm going to put the robot in the proper starting position by selecting the position B, and now it's going to start over there. I'm also going to open up some more of this information up here. And for this project, I've never really used or asked you to use this location monitor right here. But basically the way this works, if I were to say just hit drive forward for a moment, you could see my Y position, for example, is minus 907. It's saying like right there. And if I hit play, you can see it starts counting minus 627, minus 157. And you can see I crossed a 0 point like right around in here. Okay. And I can use that to help me reposition the robot. I can tell the robot to drive until it gets back to this starting position. In the case of this activity, all I'm doing is going forward on the Y and back on the Y. So I'm only going to concern myself with that Y position. Okay, and we'll use that to help us determine, hey, are we back in the starting position? We're going to use that Y position value. To do this one, I'm going to need to make use of a couple different variables, and I've already declared them. You can do it yourself by just hit make a variable. But I've created a variable called back and forth counter and line counter, and another one called position Y. So those are three variables that make sense to me. Back and forth counter is going to count how many times have I gone back and forth. Line counter is just going to count the lines each time I see them as I'm traveling. And position Y is going to help me determine, like, am I back where I began? So I've got to do some variable declarations here in the beginning. And I need 3 sets, one for each of my variables. I'm going to set the back and forth counter to 1 in the beginning, because that's keeping track of like how many lines did you see before you're ready to go back. And the first time I go through this, as soon as I hit the first line, I want to go back. So I'm going to set back and forth counter to 1. I'm going to set line counter to 0, because in the beginning, when I haven't moved yet, I haven't seen any lines. I've counted 0 lines. And line counter should go up by 1 each time I travel over a line. And hopefully you were able to do that already. Set back and forth counter, we're going to change that to position Y counter. And what I'd like to do is just change that to the position of the robot in the beginning. So that is position Y. Boom, in millimeters. And I did notice when I was going through this that if I went back to the exact starting position but was facing in the other direction and then I turned around, I was always bumping into the wall. It probably has something to do with like the exact place on this robot where the position Y is. So what I determined was a smart way to do this is don't go all the way back, like go back 50 millimeters less, and then I would be able to make the turn without bumping into the wall. So I do that by changing this here to go back to the Y position plus 50. Again, remember, as I move this way, the value is becoming more positive. So what that will do is it'll not go as deep in. It'll make the turn. I won't hit the wall. Okay. I want to repeat this process of counting lines and going back 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. But I don't want to count like a repetition or one of my repetitions is complete until I've made the journey back and forth. So in this case, what makes sense for me to use is a repeat until the back and forth counter is equal to 6, because it's starting at 1. It goes through the first one, touches it, comes back. Then I'm going to set it equal to 2. It's going to go 1, 2, come back, set it equal to 3. Go 1, 2, 3, go back, set it equal to 4. Go out to 4, come back, set it to 5, go out to 5, set it back, and now it's going to increase to 6. And when it gets to 6, I want to be done. So I'm going to repeat until the back and forth counter is equal to 6. That's how many times I'm going to go through the cycle of counting lines and going back and forth. All right. In the beginning, we are just going to take off. We're going to drive forward, and we're going to drive forward until we see one of these lines. So in this case, what I'm looking for is an if statement, and I'll say if I used a less than 50 here, if the down eye detector brightness is the way you would do this, is less than 50, that means that you've seen a line. As soon as I see a line, I'm going to want to change my line counter by 1. So line counter starts at 0. I see the first line. Now say line counter equals 1. Because these lines, I can get multiple readings on them as I'm traveling across them. I think you figured that out from the last, or activity B. I'm also going to add in here a small wait command. And what seemed to work for me was about 0.15 seconds. Okay, next. Now my line counter's changed by 1, and I want to see, like, hey, I saw a line. Am I supposed to turn around and go back? So to check that, I'll use another if statement, and we'll use an equal in this case. And we're going to be checking, is the line counter equal to the back and forth counter? And the first time I go through this, I'll hit this line, it will. So line counter becomes 1 because I saw a line. Back and forth counter already is 1. So if they're equal to each other, that means it's time to turn around and go back. So in that case, I'll go to my drivetrain and I'm just going to turn around for 180 degrees, like so. And then I'm going to say drive forward. And I want to continue driving forward until I get back to that Y position. And so a nice way to do that is I can go to control here and go wait until, and we'll get the equal sign, and we'll say drive position Y, wait until position Y equals, in my case, let's go back to here. Sorry, we're going to go back to variables, position Y. So we're going to drive forward, and then we're going to wait until that position Y equals the starting position. When we hit that position, that means we're back here again. We're again going to want to turn around to head back and do this all over again for 180 degrees. We're also going to want to do some things with our variables. So at this point, we've now completed our first back and forth. So we are going to want to change our back and forth counter by 1. So now that'll become equal to 2. And then we're also going to want to set our line counter back to 0. And after we've repeated this multiple times and we come out of it, we want to actually stop the robot. So at the end, because if the last thing we did was drive forward, it'll just go crashing into the wall. When we exit this repeat until loop, we want to stop driving. So let's take a look and see how that works. Hits the second line, comes back, hits the third line, comes back, and it looks like it's working well. Let's see if it makes all the trips. That's the fourth line, and we turn around one more time, and then we stop. So that's perfectly done. Now, something that can really help you while you're doing this, I didn't show you up front, but this is what I was doing. You can take a variable you've created, like back and forth counter, and dump it into what's called the console. You can see now it's popped up. It says, hey, as of the last program, your back and forth counter is 6, which makes sense. You can also look at, say, your line counter and dump it into the console too. That's set at 0. If I reset and hit this again, we'll see them count 1 and 1, 1, 2, 2 and 2. And you can see that the variables are working for you here. When they equal each other, boom, time to go back. And they're both changing in time. And it's a nice way to monitor and see what's going on with your variables to know if it's doing what you want it to do. In my case, it is. So I really challenge you, even if you're watching the video and it seems like, oh yeah, now I get it. Like, go try to do it without watching the video. Go see if you can now make this work without looking at the video. Or if you have to go back and look at it to get a little hint, go ahead. But I would keep doing this over and over until you can do it confidently without looking at the video or without looking at my code. Take care.